Welcome to biology. In this video, we're going to answer the questions of what is biology and what is life. The first of those two questions, what is biology? Well, biology is the study of life and the study of living things. In fact, in biology, we call a living thing an organism. Now, an organism is a plant, it's an animal, it's a fungus, it's a protist, it's a little bacteria, so anything that is alive would be considered an organism. Now, biology has many branches. You have everything from zoology to paleontology to my two favorites, ecology and ichthyology. Now, each of these is a special little subsection of the overall concept of biology. So ecology is studying the interactions between living things and the non-living components of their environment. Ichthyology is looking at lakes and the interactions of living things within a lake. So biology is a huge field, and if somebody says that they're a biologist, that means they study a little bit of everything. But oftentimes people will specialize within a very narrow section within biology. So then what is living? Well, in order for an organism to be alive, they need to have all 8 characteristics of life. Now, some textbooks say that there are 7 characteristics or 6 characteristics. Our textbook that we use says 8 characteristics, and it breaks it down into these 8 categories. The first one is all living things are made up of units called cells. Now, some living things are made of one single cell, like these little paramecium in the bottom right corner of your screen. Other organisms, like humans, we are made of many cells, and the cells within our bodies do not all look the same. Some of our cells look kind of like this picture in the middle here, where it looks like a little octopus with legs going in every direction. Those are specialized nerve cells. Our muscle cells look totally different from that. So it's important to know that cells don't all look the same, but all living things are made up of cells. The second characteristic is reproduction. So all living things are able to reproduce. Now, there are 2 ways that organisms can reproduce. They can either use sexual reproduction or asexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction just means that you have 2 separate individuals that donate cells that unite to form a new organism. Asexual reproduction only needs one parent, and this is similar to cloning. So the picture in the top right corner of the screen is of a hydra, and the hydra is going through a process called budding. So you see the little stick coming off the bottom there. That is the new organism budding off of the original. Eventually it'll separate out and be its own individual organism. So that's pretty cool. Sexual reproduction, pretty common in the animal world and relatively frequent in the plant world. However, asexual reproduction, you see that in the plant world, but you see it mostly in terms of bacteria. They do a lot of that, and a lot of the single cell organisms do asexual reproduction. The third characteristic is having a universal genetic code, and that would be DNA or RNA. These are the building blocks of life. We'll spend a whole chunk of time throughout this class, probably about the middle of the year, talking all about DNA and RNA. The fourth characteristic is growth and development. So if you're a single-celled organism, you're going to grow and get bigger. If you're a multicellular organism, you're going to go through a process of development. I included this picture of the early stages of human development. This is long before a baby is born, and humans actually start as one single cell. And that single cell goes through a series of cell divisions, and then eventually some of those cells within the little embryo start to go through specialized cell division to form eyes, or to form hands, or to form a heart. So this development where it kind of changes over time, that is a characteristic of life. Number 5, obtain and use materials and energy. This one is really just talking about you need to be able to do some chemical processes to stay alive. And we'll spend a whole unit talking about cellular energy. And this series of chemical processes is called metabolism. So this is how your body converts that food that you eat into energy and movement, and this is how your body's able to grow, and it's really an important foundational process of being able to be alive. The 6th characteristic of life is the ability to respond to the environment. Many students hear this and they think that this means that the organism is able to move. Let me be very clear, that is not the case. Being able to move is not one of the characteristics of life. Instead, this characteristic is talking about being able to respond to a stimulus or a signal. So if we think about plants, they tend to grow leaning towards the light. So if you have sunlight that hits one side of a plant more than the other, the plant is going to grow leaves and put more chlorophyll containing cells on that side of the plant so that way it can absorb the sunlight and do more photosynthesis. That's why you'll notice plants kind of leaning in that direction. Humans respond to stimuli as well. If you have a hot stove and you put your hand on it, disclaimer, do not do this ever. If you have your hand on a hot stove, that sends a signal to your brain that says, hey, this is hot, we should do something. And it signals your muscles to pull your hand away. Just like if your eyes are looking at a bright light, your pupil is going to contract and get smaller and let less light in as a response to being exposed to the stimulus of bright light. The 7th characteristic is being able to maintain a stable internal environment, and this is called homeostasis. Homeostasis relies on a series of feedback loops, and we'll talk about feedback loops more later in this course. But essentially, homeostasis is just keeping your body pretty normal all the time. Now, some organisms like humans are able to thermoregulate, and they're able to do many other processes to keep their body pretty consistent. Other organisms, like reptiles, need to lay in the sun in order to thermoregulate and warm their bodies up. But they have other processes that also work in conjunction to keep other parts of their body totally normal and stable. The final characteristic of life is evolution. Now, a lot of kids hear this term and they don't quite understand what I'm talking about. They might have a totally different idea of what evolution is. So evolution means that over a very long period of time, a population of organisms changes. And that's because over time, a particular trait, so a particular characteristic, might help an individual survive a little bit better. And that means that individual's able to get some more food, it's able to fight off predators a little bit better, and it's able to have more babies. That's the key. Because the babies are going to probably have that same trait that their parent had. And the individuals that do not have that trait probably are not going to be able to survive as well, so they're going to have fewer babies. And that means there's going to be fewer individuals without the beneficial trait and more individuals with it. And over a long period of time, that population is going to shift to have more individuals with the beneficial trait. So finally, I want you to think about, is it living, is it not living? Well, remember, in order to be living, it needs to have all 8 characteristics of life. If it is missing one of the 8 characteristics of life, it is not alive. So if we think about a candle, well, does a candle have DNA? No. Well, we already said no to something, so a candle's not alive. What about a log? So a tree that's been cut down and the log's laying on the ground. Well, does it have cells? Yes. Does it have DNA in those cells? Yeah. Is that log able to maintain homeostasis? Well, no, it's not, because it's no longer doing a lot of the normal life processes. Does it have a metabolism? Well, no, the cells are no longer going through respiration to break down food. So since it doesn't have all 8 characteristics of life, we already know a log is not living. What about grass? Well, if we go through all 8 characteristics of life, we're going to say yes to all of them. So that's how we know that grass is alive. You can go through that with the rest of these things on the list. You can look around your room and you can see if there's anything that's alive or not alive by practicing by going through all 8 characteristics of life. I know I went relatively quickly through all this information. Please send me all of your comments, questions, thoughts, reaction, feedback after watching this video. Feel free to rewatch any sections that you need to look at again to get a better understanding and make sure that you took some good notes. And I really hope that you learned something.